even though on an H1 or an L1 in US, you can create content, you can't monetize it, which means that you will be working for free. Sure, it's fine to get that skill set for free for a little bit and learn it. But then if you're not making money, you basically why you're doing it, right? And if you're not enjoying it after a certain time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Desi Return. Today, I'm excited to have Shivee on our show. Shivee went to US for her master's. After working in US for a few years, she and her husband decided to move back to India. After staying in India for a couple of years, they are back in US right now. I'm looking forward to our discussion, the reasons why they moved back and why they're back in US, how the life has been living in India and being in abroad, work-life balance, and so on. Looking forward to our discussion. With that, welcome Shivee to the show.
Thank you so much, Avinash. Thank you so much for having me and being able to share my story of why did I decide to move back to India for a short period of time, right, is very, very interesting and very, very close to me. That's because I am both. I have I have Indian culture ingrained in me as well, and then I'm also a little bit Americanized to a certain extent because I've spent almost a decade in the US at this point. So definitely to your point, came to US, and I'll give you a quick introduction for everybody who has not seen me across different content media channels. Um, I came to US in 2013. I started my career journey with Goldman Sachs back in 2010. 2013 decided to get a master's in the US, so did my master's in mathematics of finance from Columbia University in New York. Loved the city. And it is the greatest city in the world, of course, right? And some of you might disagree, and you might say that London is the greatest city in the world, and some of you might say that San Francisco is, but New York City is the greatest city in the world. So let me start just there. And then in 14, I graduated and started my first job at JP Morgan and Chase in their technology services. So that's where my journey was. And then eventually decided to become a management consultant. And that's where I am still with the Big Four, working with their quant advisory and quant finance services because I did my master's in mathematics of finance. Now, 2017 was a life-changing year for me in two aspects. 2017, what happened was I got an approval for my I-140 under EB2 category. And I was very, very excited. And what an I-140 is, to explain you, Avinash, and also our audience, is it is almost the second last step in terms of getting your permanent residence or green card in US. And 2017 was also very, very different for me because I had my first daughter in that year. So embraced motherhood as well in the same year. And these two big changes, and I was thinking, okay, fine, now I have my I-140, right? And I'm going to get my green card in 5 years, 6 years, right? And I was so naive in thinking that because whenever I saw that 2008, 2009, these people were still getting their green cards, right? At that point, 2017, I said, okay, maybe 8 or 9 years is when, and I can still wait and continue my journey of a job. And why is a green card important to me, or why is permanent residence important in the US is because either in US you are either on an H1 or an L1 if you are working. Now, if you are on a dependent, then you can do anything else. So for example, if you're an L2, H4, it works, but H1 and L1 is very, very much tied to your job. So you cannot do any side hustles right now with the present laws under H1 and L1. For example, you can't drive an Uber for extra cash, right? So that's something that you can't do. You can't really think about creating a business. Sure, you can start maybe investing in properties and then have a property manager manage it, and then that can be your side hustle, but you cannot meaningfully spend time in creating anything of value on the side. So those are some very big restrictions of H1 and L1, in my honest opinion. So of course, a permanent residency was that freedom that I was looking for. And when I looked at the statistics, Avinash, and I'm not making this up. There was a very detailed Cato Research Institute study. The wait time in 2000, if you filed for your green card in 2017, for Indians, people of Indian origin, was 80 years and 150 years in EB3. So it was, or maybe vice versa, but it was like I would be dead, basically, right? So before even getting my green card. And um, that was not it. That this is not going to work for me because just how I am as a person, that I wanted to have varied interests. I wanted to discover and explore new things. So my husband and I started to think at that point, what are our options, right? And our options were basically live on an H1 for the entirety of our lives. That's number one. And then as soon as you retire, you're kicked out and you basically don't get any of the benefits that you've paid for. The second option is that explore Canada. And the reason was that in 2017 and 18, Canada was really up and coming. So the skilled worker visa was becoming very, very, or skilled worker permanent residence was very, very prevalent in Canada at that point. So, but then Canada is also very cold. So as a person who does not enjoy cold weather too much, I was like, don't want to go north. So that is not going to happen either. So what can we do? And my husband was very open to us moving to either a more immigration friendly country, if it was not that cold, basically, or moving back to India, because India is really, really, there's so many opportunities back in India now. So that's where we explored. And we started to think through what are some other ways in which I can expedite my permanent residence or our permanent residence within the US. So one of the ways in which you can do that is via the EB1 category, which is the employer-based first preference category. There is also the extraordinary visa in that. So it's almost like what Priyanka Chopra gets, right? I'm not Priyanka Chopra. I'm not going to get an EB1A, of course, right? So this is how my thinking was, that EB1C is something that I can fight for. And EB1C is really the international executive manager position, where you are an international executive who has multinational managerial experience. So I said, fine, let's explore that route. And 2017 is when I started to have these conversations with my boss, because to really build that case, Vinash, you know, it's a geographical move across the oceans. It takes time to happen. So I started this process of really connecting with my boss in 2017, and 2019 was when I got an opportunity to move. So that's almost a year and a half that a worth of effort just to make that move happen. And I'll just pause there. Avinash, I know I'm just talking a lot, so I would give you time to also just react and opine on that.
No, yeah, no, sure. I didn't want to interrupt. So
Hmm.
yeah, thanks for sharing that, Shivee. I think giving a background on why you decided to go to
Yeah.
US and the reasons. I think you are kind of laying
Hmm.
out of moving back to India and
Yeah.
the thought process there. So just to confirm, so you were working in India before moving to US
Yes,
for the
that's correct.
masters, for a
Yes.
couple of years.
Yeah.
Um, so
Bangalore, Nama Bangalore, love Nama Bangalore. That's where I started my career at Goldman. It was back in Domblur, very close to Kormangla at that point. And I used to live in HSR, which was not this big that it is right now. The HSR layout, it's pretty advanced. As recently I saw it, but very good city, Bangalore. I loved it, and that's where even when I moved back, Avinash, in 2019, Bangalore was my first preference. So I had the option to either go to Mumbai or Bangalore, and Bangalore is something I know. So that's what we did.
So sounds like I think it's an internal transfer with
Yes.
JP. So that's I think the case that you were building and you had that kind of set forth. Maybe I know you kind of mentioned from your career planning perspective. If it is okay, like I mean, maybe you can share like how your husband has planned and how did it work out? Just because these are common questions about a career transition,
Yeah.
especially for
Career
someone moving
transitions,
from
yeah, of course.
yeah.
So there are other things also to consider, Avinash, right? And I didn't make it happen through JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase, I stayed only like 8 months, moved into management consulting after, which was a big four, and I'm still there. So I still continue to work there. Now, in terms of career, we wanted to be very clear again of our options, right? After having spent 6 years in the US, it's hard to really think about going back as a family and then really thinking that this move might be permanent for us, right? And then we might be closing doors of opportunities for US. So what my husband and I did was my husband decided to stay here for that time period that I was there in India, and I moved with my 1.5-year-old at the time to India alone. And then, of course, my in-laws were very, very supportive at that time. So they left everything that was there, in their home and came to us in Bangalore and stayed with us. So that was a big level of help. The other things that I also thought about, Avinash, was that if I have to do it alone, as almost like a single parent, right? Because then UK does not remain an option anymore because I cannot get that kind of help. And of course, with my in-laws coming in and staying in, me getting a lot of opportunities and more time to spend with my parents, my daughter Trisha also spent a lot of time with her grandparents, which was very important to me, to us as a couple. It's not just about career. I think life is more,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Life, and of course, right? And when you have kids, just life is just so much more, and career starts to become a smaller and smaller part of it, is what I feel. Of course, what you do, you should love what you do, otherwise there's no point in doing it, basically. But then, of course, life is also about how much time are you spending with kids, how much time are you spending with your parents, because you are going to get only very limited number of years now after, and that's the honest truth. So that's where I decided that maybe UK is not going to work, or Canada is not going to work for this short term plan, and India is where I want to be. And then, of course, 6 years, I've not spent Diwali in India. I've not spent the New Year's in India. I've not spent all those festivals in India. How lively it is in India versus US, it's like freezing in New York City, at least, right? And you'll be wearing your big coats and jackets, and it doesn't feel just the same. So that's where I decided that I want a few things. Number one, my daughter to have to spend time with her grandparents. I get to spend time with everybody, like my parents and my parent-in-laws. And then, of course, having to experience the festivals for me as well as my daughter, because I grew up with those experiences, with going to my dadi's house and having, chaklis and matris for Diwali. So I wanted that experience for my daughter. So that's how I planned about which geography to choose, because the firm that I work with, we operate everywhere across the globe, right? So
Understood.
everything is open. But then um, what works out for you is the most important bit. And the second aspect also, Avinash, is that since I had worked in India for a large amount of time prior to moving here, I knew about the working culture.
Yeah.
Right. And still, it was a kind of a shock coming back and getting that habits back. But of course, I knew a little bit that what are the expectations, how do managers behave, how do you become a little bit more confident with what you're trying to bring to the table. So that's where I decided that India was it. And then my husband decided that he wanted to stay here. Now, again, it
Makes
was a
sense.
long distance relationship with time zone differences, right?
Yeah.
12-hour time zone differences, which meant that the conversations that we had were a little bit smaller, right? You can't be on the call all the time, every time, because I have office, he's sleeping, right? And so on and so forth. But of course, he also made a point to visit us more often. So he did like 3 trips in one year.
Yeah.
So which was very, very good. And then I came to US for a little bit as well when I was in India. So that's how we worked out the long distance relationship part of that.
Thanks for sharing those
Mhm.
details and giving a little bit color to that. So
Yeah,
just for my own, I think maybe just to clarify a little bit for the audience, right? I think the logic was deciding India as a geography, for the
yeah,
reasons that you have
hmm,
outlined
yeah,
for this short term while you are
yeah,
figuring out.
hmm,
So I think one of the main factor that you mentioned is having the flexibility to do different things, right?
yeah,
Not
hmm,
limiting to, a particular employer, having
yeah,
the flexibility. So I think you kind of touched a little bit, but I just want to make sure it's clear maybe to the
hmm,
audience. You have the employer who was ready to sponsor on the EB1,
Yeah.
and you're
Mhm.
switching from EBT to EB1, but you are
Yes.
planning to take this short-term, change of a geography. I don't know, is it because you wanted to explore something, or is it because you want that to be I'm just so that we can clarify a little bit, right? So you have
It's a
your
requirement. It's a
yeah.
requirement, Avinash, right, of EB1C, International Manager. So the
Exposure.
requirement is exactly the exact requirement is that you should have worked with the same employer in an international location for at least 12 months out of the last 3 years. And you should have managed teams, you should have managed projects, you should have managed timelines, and so on and so forth. So you really have to demonstrate all of these things. And just staying in US, you can't do that, right?
Sure.
Because US is within. So you have to explore an international geography, and which is international to US. And it can be Canada, it can be UK. Generally, it is these two geographies that people explore. People also go to Netherlands. But then if they go to Netherlands, they never come back. So it's just like they stay there. Then you can also explore, and same for UK actually. People go to UK and they never come back. They love it UK so much, and it's much closer to India as well. I think it's like 8 hour flight. So they're just like, oh, I just want to stay here. But then Canada, I've seen people come back. So this is just how
Yeah.
I've seen people work, but then EB1C definitely something to explore. But then there are obvious risks, Avinash, in this path that you can take, right? Because it's a two-way international move. It's not a one-way international move. It's not that you just want to go to India and you live in India, right? What if you go to India and you're fired, right? Or what if you go to India and your boss is fired? Or what if you go to India, your boss is not fired, but you not on the same terms anymore, and now you can't come back? Or what if there's just so many things that can go wrong in an international move like this, that you have to be very, very patient and persistent to make it happen. You have to maintain good relationship over a long period of time. And it's very harder. It's harder than I say it, because when you go to India, you go your mental how would I put it? How your mentally also goes to India. Like
Mhm.
your habits and mannerisms and everything starts to almost align with the Indian work culture. And Indian work culture is so society oriented and so socialist oriented. It's so almost, what will she say? What will he say? Right. And then you do not have that individualism almost that you learned so hard. It's very hard to hang on to that. And what I mean by that is that you will think, uske diary mein, should I put time or not? Maybe he's very busy. He'll never join, right? My call. And you start to think in those terms where you start to almost give up on the relationships that you've built. So that is a hard to manage thing in terms of this move. And I do not recommend anybody to do it if they do not have very, very, very strong mentors and supporters in their present company.
Yeah, makes
So
sense. Thanks for sharing
yeah,
that, the details there.
yeah,
If we can touch a little bit on the work-life balance, especially you have worked in India before moving to US,
yeah,
worked there for almost 4 years or 5 years
yeah.
before taking this short-term stint at
Hmm.
in India.
Yeah.
So, can you compare and contrast the work-life balance before you went to US and
Hmm.
how it has progressed within India? That's one aspect. And then
Yeah.
between US and India, I think that would be very helpful. And especially for women who was in a tech industry,
Yeah.
in India, it's different, right? I mean, these are some of the common maybe perceptions or
Hmm.
misconceptions, or maybe anything that you can share from your experience that could definitely help people who are thinking about moving to India from a
Yeah.
career.
Thank you, Vinash. It's a very interesting questions that you're bringing, and these are exactly the points that I would also think through, right? Because I'm a woman in tech. I started my career as an engineer at Goldman Sachs, right? I was coding on a 80% of the time basis. Then I did my master's in mathematics of finance, which is also a heavily male denominated field, right? So it's very interesting that you bring all of these perspectives. So let me break it down for you in all the questions that you have. Started my career at Goldman, which was an MNC, still work at a Big Four, which is still an MNC. So I've never been at a company that is wholly India based. So I've never worked, say, at a Flipkart or at a Ola, right? So my comparison would be between MNCs, and my understanding is MNCs are slightly better than Indian owned companies culturally, because at least we are able to import some cultural aspect of working culture, right? So I'll just give you an example. When I was in India, Gorman, or even right now, we might have calls after 8 p.m. It's very, very common. And the reason is because it is an MNC, your clients come in only when, US wakes up. So the time difference is there. But then you can flex. So you can come in a little bit later in the morning. You can start your day at 11, 12. But then the expectation is that you stay till like 9 p.m. So that's your work day. What that means in an Indian context is that you cannot plan anything on a weekday in India. It's almost impossible, even on a Friday, because Friday as well, when your Friday is ending, US Friday is starting. So this is where your meetings are going to be. So it's very, very hard to plan anything reasonable on a
Yeah.
weekday in India. There is an expectation to also work on the weekends in India, which I still find bizarre. So in US as well, because I do work at a large company, and we do have like very large clients, right, and very large projects that we are running. So I might have some work on, say, a weekend, but it's nothing that is not manageable. It's nothing that is more than, say, 1 hour or 2 hours worth of work, right? And that's also really completely depends on you if you want to do it. If you say no, then like nobody's going to bother you. It's not common for your bosses to have your phone number in the US. Let me put it that way, Avinash, right?
Yeah.
And in India, that's the first thing that you'll do. You'll text them, Shivee, when are you going to be online? Or like your bosses might call you. So it's the the space that you have in India mentally to do anything else on weekends and weekdays is lesser
Yeah.
if you work at a company, versus in US. I start my workday, I leave my home at 7 a.m. in the morning, right? So my train is at 7:15 or so, and then I'm back at around 6 p.m. in the evening. But then I have the entire evening to do other things. I can still do it. And I do work a hybrid schedule, which means that like some days I'm at home, so I'm like 8 to 5, and then I'm done for the day. So which is not a bad thing. But in India, you it's hard to achieve that. Now, so I covered the difference between US and Indian work culture, right? Now, how the work culture has shifted in India. That's the second question that I would like to take in terms of. So I worked in India from 2010 to 2013, and then from 2019 to 21. Um, there is a lot more camaraderie, like people are more friendly. Colleagues become friends more easily in India. There are pros and cons to that approach, more cons than pros, but that is something that I've seen. In terms of I don't think the work culture has evolved as much. There is still a lot of competition to get to the top. Tenure is heavily, heavily, you need tenure, right? And by tenure, I mean that somebody who has 25 years of work experience would be picked over somebody who has 15 years of work experience, even though 15-year might be getting higher value for whatever they're creating, right? Maybe more sales or whatever they're trying to do. So that tenure is still heavily, heavily valued in India. And if you don't have a certain number of years of work experience outside of the tech industry, then you cannot meaningfully become a significantly senior executive, is where I would put it. Now, as a woman in tech, again, interesting question, right? And I've not worked in any technology company. So my understanding is that maybe Google or say uh, Meta does not operate in India, but Google might be keeping a good working culture for the diverse sort of candidates. But at least in the finance space that I've been, there is almost a cultural um, I would say, cultural mindset that women cannot meaningfully contribute to, say, a technology role. Or if a woman is doing a technology role well, she's just a diversity candidate, right? So that's very heavily ingrained in the culture of how we think. It's hard to get out of in just one generation or two generations. So that's definitely there. Definitely something that is changing, but then you would continue to see that people who come in from, say, a very good institute, especially our male colleagues, can have this inherent bias that women are here only because they're women, instead of really thinking about, is she capable of doing that? So that's a very interesting perspective. There are like other nuances that we as women have to navigate as well, which is different than what some of our male colleagues might have to navigate in the same environment.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for sharing your perspectives and insights, especially the
Mhm,
differences between US and India and your experience, working in 2010 and 2019.
mhm.
That brings up me a quick question. I think you are in India during the COVID time, right? I mean,
Yes, that's correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been very interesting. I mean, especially with the remote, structure, hybrid, and things evolving. I don't know with the consulting, which requires a bit of a
Mhm.
travel. So I don't know like how you were able to navigate. And also you mentioned about this long distance,
Yeah.
you know. So just curious, anything you wanted to share from your perspective in terms of people who are considering about this option, like doing that kind of planning, anything that you can share as an insights on that.
So that's interesting, Avinash. I think as a consultant, I was like 5 days in office, right? Prior to COVID. And by 5 days in office in India specifically, for some consulting companies, it might mean that you're working out of something called um, an ODC, which is almost like a secured site. And the secured site means that you can't even take inside your cell phones,
Hmm.
right? Or your because there's just confidential data, and we're trying to work with our international clients to give them trust that India is a place where you can trust us with your system. So that's why we'll create these almost ecosystems where we do our work. It was very interesting when remote happened, like how quickly we were able to adapt as a firm, as a company, and as a best practice, that it's okay not to be on the desk all the time. You can actually take this remote, and you can actually trust your people to deliver outside of your secured arrangements, right? So that shift happened overnight. And then now, Vinash, I cannot even think that, I was doing 5 days in office with a 1.5-year old.
Yeah.
So I have another 10-month-old now. And I think, how was I doing it? How was I taking a 7 o'clock train every morning, coming back at 6, and then my toddler would sleep at like 8, and she's cranky like 6 to 8, right? Like morning is the good time with the kids. So how was I managing it? It's very, very interesting. But then what I would recommend highly for anybody who's considering this move is very important. Reduce your family commute time. And family commute time, what I mean is that if your kids go to school by bus, it's great, put them in the bus, send them. But then you should be staying very, very close to your office, at least one person's office, so that they if they go in, it's like a 5 minute or a 10-minute drive, and then they can come back. That's because Bangalore traffic is insane. Hyderabad traffic is insane. you and you would not even get an Uber in the morning, right? You would be like, you'd be ready. 8 o'clock, you'll start booking your Uber. Till 9:30, you're not going to get it. So be very mindful of those challenges, which are very, very real, and they can wear down on you, right? Just think about it. You're trying to book an Uber for 1 hour every day for 5 days. It's just you're going to be in a very bad mental state. So what really helped for me was that I was staying at a 5-minute walking distance from my office. So I would get down, drop my kid at the daycare for a bit, right? She was like 2, she started to go to school. Well, it's school daycare sort of, right? And then I would go to work. So that sort of arrangement is very important. If both of you are working from office, that's something which is not ideal. Ideally, I would not pick that option. I would rather have that both of you have remote flexibility, so that 2 days one parent is home, 2 days the other parent is home, and then you can think about how do you want to manage. But I think that is very important in India,
Okay.
especially.
Cool. Um, so maybe just reflecting back, right? I
Yeah.
think you got a chance to spend time in India, and
Hmm.
now you're back in US. It's been again another 2, 3 years
Yeah.
since you've been living. Based on your experience living in India, do you what? How does the future hold? I know it's a very a big assumption here, but just curious. Is this something still on cards, or based on your experience, may not be right now? Just curious from your experience, what you have in plans in the future.
So I have not decided, Avinash, and I think that's where I think life is an adventure. Right? And I'm 35, right? And we have this mindset that 30, my life finish, okay, now you can't do anything. If you have not achieved your dreams, like you might as well just wait for death. But that's not how life works. And I think you would agree that 30s is when you're really getting into the groove, because you've spent your entire 20s building yourself up. And I don't want that sense of adventure to end
Yeah.
for me and for my kids. I don't like this idea of settling down. It's just like I'm not a tree. So, and that's what the pact that I have with my husband is that sure, careers are important and it's important to build that financial stability, but then how much is enough, right? And you can't put everything for retirement. Yeah, when I'm retired, I'll write a book. When I'm retired, I'll watch TV. When I'm retired, I'll travel. Number one, you'll have arthritis. Number two, you might not just have the same level of what you want to do right now. So we have kept it very open, Avinash, in terms of our plans. Overall, I would say the overall plan is that to give great opportunities for our kids. That's, of course, very high on the list because that's what parents always continue to think about. But then, second, not lose the spark of this adventure, right? That you can still explore, that 30 is not old, 40 is not old, 50 is not old. You can change locations or you can change geographies at any point in your life. That's completely possible. So continuing to build towards that. And that's also the mindset that not to settle down, right? Will I stay in US forever? I don't know. Will I move to India? I don't know. Will I move to UK? I don't know. Right? So it's the sense of adventure that I'm on. But of course, India is very close, also given that the how we celebrate festival, and I think I was talking about it earlier, you're wearing big jackets here when it's Diwali, right? And in India it's like truly where you see that how festivals are. So that's something definitely on the cards, but the reasons have to be right.
Yeah.
And the reasons would not be, Avinash, that now I want to settle down. And, that's maybe when we are 65, that's when we will think about what is the city that we want to stay in, but open to adventure and open to new possibilities, new locations till then.
Cool. Yeah, life is all about adventures and experiences for sure.
Yeah.
So I just want to circle back to the discussion that we started off with,
Yeah.
with the flexibility, right? I
Hmm.
think I know you have been with the Big Four, an amazing career, but you also mentioned about the flexibility. So you
Hmm.
have like other consulting that you do. Like, is there anything that you can share? Like, what is that flexibility? What is that you're passionate about? What
Hmm.
are the things that you have tried? So we can kind of circle back to that, which is an important aspect that you look for. And that's the reason you kind of took this option and then kind of return
Yeah.
back. So
Yeah.
how is that going? And what do you, yeah, if you can share something, that would be fantastic.
So that's very interesting, Avinash, right? Again, so social media is something that was up and coming, I would say, in 2016 and 17. And 16 and 17, if you made it on social media and you had a good niche and you could work with it, you would have made good money, right? And you would have made a good brand for yourself, which you can then pivot onwards and so on and so forth. So that is something that I really wanted to explore, right? But then when you do social media, and how I think, Avinash, is that I want to have return on my time, basically, right? And by return on my time is either number one, I'm enjoying it, and that's why I'm doing it. I'm passionate about it, or I'm making money out of it, right? You some extra income so that you can put towards your future and your kids' future. Or I would rather just watch Netflix, to be honest, right? Like I don't want to work for free. So even though on an H1 or an L1 in US you can create content, you can't monetize it, which means that you will be working for free. Sure, it's fine to get that skill set for free for a little bit and learn it, but then if you're not making money, you basically, why you're doing it, right? And if you're not enjoying it after a certain time. So that's where I started my content creation journey in 2019, as soon as I moved back to India. 2019, I would say, was all learning. So I was still learning how to make videos, how to be present on camera, because I've never done it before prior to that, right? Editing long form videos. I was editing my videos myself, and these are long form. I was editing on Premiere Pro, 20-minute videos. And I was doing it every day along with my full-time job. So I created almost like a skincare channel, which was, I would say, a pretty successful skincare channel back in the day. I was, I would say, a known skincare influencer back in 2019 and 20. A little successful, a little bit, not too much, but a little bit, right? So that's where I learned all my content skills. And that's where I started to get brand deals as well. Now, I started to get brand deals. I'm working in India, so it's perfectly, I can do anything that I want. And I see the pay is peanuts. And the pay is peanuts. By that, Avinash, what I mean is that I had a channel with 50,000 followers, right? And each of my videos was getting, I would say, 50,000 to 100,000 views at that time, and shorts a little bit in millions, right? So it was a good channel. And the money I was making was 10,000 rupees INR for, say, a one short. It's not worth it. It's not worth the time and the kind of publicity that I can bring to the brands. So that's when I decided that this, number one, not going to work out for me long term, getting paid much, much, much more doing what I'm good at, which is finance. And then it also helped me explore and close that gap that I've never tried something else. I've never tried this content. Maybe I will be good at it, right? And then you experience it and then you're like, fine, you're good at it. And then that's all right. Like you move away. So when I moved back to US in 2021, I kind of shut down my skincare and like that was not working out for me. And then finally, what I did was I started something that I'm good at, which is finance and career. And because this is something that I've really navigated so far. And uh, uh, well, almost well, I would say, right? It's not too bad. So that's where I wanted to help our candidates and kids really think about their careers, because at 20, I didn't have clarity. I was like wasting away my time. So I thought and because I'm the firstborn in my family, there was nobody to guide me. So all the guidance I had to get was gather myself and do it myself. So I said, fine, let's start to do help our kids with a few things. Number one is identifying if they want to do their masters, if they want to do it abroad, then I do have services that I provide in terms of really writing your statement of purpose or really writing your resume. Or if you are looking at a career pivot, then how can you manage? Or moving into mid-level management, how do you manage? How do you manage your finances? So that's where I started to bring in a little bit more value. And now I do have a thriving, side hustle that I still continue to manage, which is in career finance and education. And then, of course, I help people directly one-on-one. So that is something that I'm sure you'll find somewhere in the description box if you want to book time. But then very limited availability because I work full time. So I do have like Saturday and Sunday to help our folks. So that's where my side hustle evolved. Like eventually I decided has to stay side hustle, but at the same time, I want to help people as well. So that is important.
Great. Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. So I'm just being mindful of the time.
Mhm.
Is there anything that we haven't covered or any advice that you want to share for people who are aspiring or who are considering to move back to India? From your perspective, I mean, I think seeing the both sides of the world, somebody with the adventure spirit and so on. I mean, anything that you wanted to share that we haven't covered so far.
Right. So when I moved back to India, Avinash, right, and I knew that I'm moving on a temporary basis. So what I did not go and buy furniture. Okay, that's number one thing that I would say because you don't know if you will uh, like India or not, right? And you might not, right? And it's very different for everybody. And then, or you might, and your kids might not, right? Your kids might be in middle school and they might want to come back. So, what do you do? So, what I tell everybody, Avinash, is that be mindful that the first 6 months to 1 year is really your testing phase of whether you really want to move back or is it just the idea of moving back to India that brought you there. So in order to do that, you can go and buy, your electronics and all that. I recommend buy secondhand so that you don't spend too much money upfront. But then for furniture, just rent it, right? And the reason I say rent it is that it will be functional. For the first 6 months, you can get a bed. City Furnish guys will come. They will set up the bed in like 3 hours. So, right, a bed and sofa and a study table and everything. And then when you're leaving, they will take it back in 3 hours. So you don't have to do anything. Just pay rent on those items. And then if you decide that this is the place that you want to stay at, you can meaningfully start to buy furniture step by step. So you don't have to go to IKEA and get everything all together because now you're spending lakhs and lakhs of rupees to set up. And then 1 year later, you realize it's not even for me. So that's be mindful of that. That's number one. There's going to be a difference that you will see in terms of how people work and how people manage things. So sure, you have house help in India, Avinash, right? But then you have to manage the help also, right? That's also a task that is onto you, and sometimes it's just easier to do things yourself. So and because we come from US, we are so used to doing things ourselves, it just translates like that. Like you will see house help not working as you would do something, and then you would go in and do it yourself. So that mindset shift almost takes a little bit of time as well to get used to. And then of course there is dust and pollution that we cannot we cannot be prepared for. So that again takes time for you to really think about in the 1 month or 2 months time frame. Is definitely something that I would think about. That be open to opportunities, be open to what you can do there, but then don't just go with the intent of all in at once. Like think about a little bit about your finances so that you don't basically waste money in something that you might not enjoy in the long term.
Oh, yeah. No, thanks for sharing some practical, tactical things there
Yeah.
in terms of the plan. Um,
Mhm.
so, yeah, once again, thank you very much for taking the time and being with us and sharing your insights, your journey, and how you planned about, the temporary move and then back there, and also like as you think about the future. So, thanks a lot for your time today, Shivi.
Thank you so much, Avinash, for having me. I'm certain that a lot of people are thinking about moving back to India. A few reasons because the permanent residency is a little bit more challenging in the Western countries right now, and then India has so many more opportunities that we can definitely t- um, take take for us and create something meaningful. So happy to be here and to be able to share my experience of living on both the sides of the world and hopefully be able to help some people think about when they move back to India.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the idea is to provide the facts and help
Hmm.
people make the decision whether to stay
Yeah.
or, yeah.
Hmm.
So, yeah, thanks a lot. Have a good
Thank
day.
you. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us on this insightful journey of Desi Return. If you enjoyed this episode and want to explore more stories and expert advice, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts and experiences. By the way, check out the links in the description below for our Facebook group and social media for updates and engaging discussions as well as connecting with fellow Desi Returners. Thank you once again, and until next time, may your Desi Return journey be filled with joy, growth, and endless possibilities.